Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As you know, every Thursday we post our video blog about a important issue for our Issues at a Glance that we're working on. And we have a really special thing this week. We're actually doing a live roundtable with some of our partners to talk about the utility shutoff moratorium. So this is the rule that says utilities cannot shut off people's power right now because of COVID. That moratorium, which we usually have in the winter, is in effect until September 1st. And next week, the Public Service Commission will be making the decision about whether or not they should extend that shutoff. So I'm really excited to be here with some of our partners. To get started, I think we'll go around and do a round of introductions. Rabbi Margolis, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Rabbi Bonnie Margulis. I'm the Executive Director of Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, and I really thank the Sierra Club for taking leadership on this issue and inviting us to participate in this roundtable today.
Great. Dana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dana Kelly. I am lead organizer for Northside Rising. Have been very active in working to keep the utilities moratorium in effect during the pandemic, and think that we should do more work to get it done. Thank you for this opportunity.
Great. And Don?
Yes, I'm Don Ferber. I'm the chair of the John Muir chapter of the Sierra Club here in Wisconsin. I'm very active with our Beyond Coal team and was one of the leaders in working to get the moratoriums extended that we're still working on.
Great. And in case you don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Ward. I am the director for the statewide branch of the Sierra Club. So thank you all for joining us today. I am going to kick it off. We'll go around with a couple of questions to get us started for each of you. And then we want to hear from you, any questions you have. So please comment on the video stream as you're watching it, and we will get to those questions at the end. So the first question I have for you, Rabbi Margolis, is what are the impacts of having your electricity?
Yeah, so the impact of having your electricity shut off is huge. And to be clear, the moratorium right now is on utility shut off for electricity, for gas, for water. And, just imagine for yourself, if when the power goes off during a storm or something, you panic. And that's usually for a couple hours, not for the indefinite future until you can afford to pay off your bills. We're talking about loss of refrigeration. We're talking about at a time when people are already food insecure, to lose access to your refrigeration is enormous. We're talking about access to air conditioning and to heat. We're talking about access to water. And, at a time when we're being told to wash our hands 1 million times a day, not to have your water is actually a huge health risk. And when you do get your power shut off, the utility companies usually tell you seek shelter elsewhere. Well, I don't know where the elsewhere is going to be in a time of pandemic when you can't go to the shelters. We're told to socially distance, and that's just not possible at our shelters. People who can't afford to pay their electricity bills certainly can't afford to go stay in a hotel indefinitely. You can't say, well, the kids will be all right at least while they're in school, because they're not in school. So the impact on people's health, on people's, really on their lives is huge and really can't be overstated. In the middle of a pandemic is not time for people to lose access to their electricity. It's just immoral to contemplate doing that.
Thank you so much. And you just touched on actually the next question for Dana, but Dana, I'll put it out to you in case you want to add anything to what she just so eloquently said about why this is why this matters all the time, having the impacts of having people's utilities shut off, and why it matters a lot more now, if there's anything you want to add.
Definitely. Thank you, Rabbi, for speaking so truthfully and eloquently about this problem. But in any instance and in any case, to not have your utilities is is a health risk. Anytime that you don't have working and running hot water, anytime that you don't have good refrigeration for food and good ways to store your food for healthy eating, it's a health risk. Well, multiply that by 1,000 with the COVID pandemic right now. Not only is it a health risk, as Rabbi Margolis just stated, that you're told to seek shelter and there is nowhere else to go. And at the same time, if you're found or deemed to be living in a home that doesn't have utilities, then you also risk eviction, which is actually not in moratorium state anymore, because for some reason the governor or the mayor cannot deem COVID-19 a public health risk right now. I don't understand that either. So with all of that being said, it is very a trying time for a lot of people to try to figure out how to stay safe and stay alive.
Thank you so much. So we just heard how important this issue is and how serious it is. But Don, some people might be wondering why Sierra Club cares about this issue since we focus on the environment. Can you explain how this relates to the work that we historically?
Right. Thank you. One thing is, I mean, the reason we're fighting for 100% clean energy in the first place is because of climate change. It's a critical problem, but one of the things we're already seeing is that those who are most impacted are people of lower income communities of color. So they're already suffering from the impacts of climate change. They're the ones who can least afford their utility bills as they're going up, both sometimes in winter too, but in summer as you need more cooling and everything else, that they're being impacted more. But in addition, a lot of the coal plants are located in low-income communities. It's not the utility executives who lives next to the coal plants. It's communities of color, working people, and people who are not as well off. So they're being doubly burdened by the pollution that's being put out by these plants, sometimes just directly, or the mercury in the waters when people are fishing and trying to eat the fish. So there's an extra burden that's being put on these people, where the added health risks at a time of COVID, we know how that's impacting people, and we've seen how brown and black people are having much higher rates of COVID and dying from the disease. But in addition to which, we're fighting for 100% clean energy for everybody. And unfortunately, those of lower income are not able to participate as readily because of a lot of our current rules. And so we want 100% clean energy for everybody, because those who have it have solar on their homes, for instance, it's lowering their utility bills. But those who can't afford it don't have that same option, even sometimes to put in better energy efficiency, which goes to clean energy, reducing the energy use. So we've really doubled up on the impacts of people who are already being impacted. And so it's really an equity issue, and it's part of why we're fighting for the 100% clean energy.
Thank you so much. So Rabbi Margulis, some people are asking how many people are really affected by this? Aren't we just talking about this small number? Is this really such a big deal that we should be focusing so much on that?
Yeah, it's actually a lot of people. 71,000 households are at risk of losing their utilities if the moratorium is not extended. And of that, 17,500 are at risk of losing access to water. So it is huge. And the people who are most affected by this are the people who can least, obviously, who can least afford this. They can't afford to pay their utility bills. They can't afford anything to mitigate it. And we're mostly, primarily talking about the people who are hardest hit, low wage and undocumented workers. The sector of our economy that have been hardest hit by the pandemic and the economic fallout are restaurant workers, are retail workers, home healthcare workers, people who work in our homes, early childhood education workers. These are the people who have lost their jobs, who have no recourse, who can't pay their bills, and who really have no place to go if they lose their utilities, their electricity and their water. And these are also people, particularly the undocumented workers who were not included, actually, who were deliberately excluded from all of the COVID relief packages from both the federal government and the state. And so they weren't getting the $600 extra unemployment. They weren't getting any of the other financial or unemployment insurance or other help from these aid packages. They were deliberately left out, even though they are tax-paying workers and an active part of our economy and our community. So there's a huge population out there that are at risk. They've had little to nothing in the way of support from either our federal or our state government. And they are the ones who are the least able to have any other resources. And most of these populations are people of color. Most of the workers who are in these industries, in the restaurant industry, in retail, or in early childhood education, are primarily women, and primarily, again, women of color, and many undocumented women. And very often they are the sole support of their families. So it is a huge issue. It's not just a handful of people, and it's people who really have nothing else to fall back on. And as a society that claims to care for the most vulnerable among us, this is really a measure of who we are as a society. Are we people who care about each other, or are we that rugged go it alone? And I hope that we're a society that cares for each other.
Thank you. I hope so too. I think we are. We'll find out, I guess. Dina, can you talk a little bit about whether any of that resonates with what you're hearing from the people you work with, and what the impacts of this?
Yes, I don't know if you hear me. I think you kind of faded out. But it definitely parallels, and then it intersects. I found that out again. Am I still connected?
Yes.
Yep, and we
Okay,
can hear
good.
you. You sound great.
Okay, good. But yes, I found out not only does it parallel, but it intersects. And it does that because, just as Rabbi Margalis just said, that so many people that are the hardest working and that pays their taxes diligently were the ones who were left out of all of the relief. That was the same on the north side, because majority of our workers are healthcare workers, so they were frontliners. They had to be out there every day, putting themselves and their families at risk. A lot of our workers are front workers, and those workers had to not be able to work, but because of the restaurants that they worked for, they did not get the work share $600 relief for unemployment. So again, their family was left in the dark. Then I find out on both the north and the south side of the people of color that no one wants to share that they're struggling, because they're afraid that if they ask for help, they're going to lose their family. Their family's going to be torn apart. And one thing, if you don't know anything about people of color, Black or brown, we are people, family-oriented people. Not saying anyone else isn't, but we're very close-knit. We believe in helping each other and being there for each other, and to have the fear of losing your children or your family being torn apart and put into the system, and then exploited in the system, they're afraid. We're afraid. So no one to share that they are struggling. They keep it in the dark, even when they are in the dark, and it's scary. It's scary, a scary place to be, especially when there are so many uncertainties, and as it's already been shown time and time again that the communities of color are always the ones that are left out and left holding the bag. We're paying doubly, as Don has said. We're paying with our health, we're paying with our wealth, and then we're paying extra to do so because we pay late fees, reconnection fees, astronomical security deposit fees, all of that eats huge chunks out of our little bitty paycheck. So we need little relief during this time, and really, period. But especially during this time, we need relief, we need help, we need debt forgiveness, we need grace, we need mercy, we need justice.
Wow, thank you for saying that. We just heard so well how this is sort of doubly impacted with a lot of the immigration crisis we're seeing, racial justice. Don, can you talk a little bit more about some of the other crises we're experiencing right now, including the climate crises, and how this just adds on to that?
Right. As Dana so eloquently pointed out, there's a lot of economic injustice underlying a lot of this and the impacts on people. At a time of COVID, when people don't have the money coming in that they normally do, many are stressed out. Again, the basic issue is that the moratorium is going to impact those people who can't pay. So as an economic issue, there are some underlying factors to this that many people may not be aware of. And that is that in utility bills that people are paying, that the rates for residential customers are higher than commercial customers. So there's already an extra burden being put on residential customers, including low-income people. And then a few years ago, a number of the utilities raised their fixed fees where you have less control over, lowering your utility bill than you might have otherwise. So all this has led to a systemic problems that really have accentuated the racial disparities that are going on right now. And that's really laid some of this bare. Now, one of the things is we're seeing some heat waves this summer and so on that tie into this, but COVID is something that we anticipate will be passed at some point. This is revealing the disparities in our system for things that will not go away. The climate crisis is only going to get worse over time. And so we really are seeing how the impacts now just of COVID are highlighting the racial disparities and the underlying economic problems that are going on and the need to resolve many of these things. And unfortunately, our system is not set up to deal with this. As Dana was just saying, there really needs to be more support, but there really needs to be more equity in the system from the ground up with education and housing and salaries and everything else. So that's one of the reasons, at this point in time, one of the issues too is that coal now is more expensive to run a coal plant than it is to put in new clean energy. And yet we're still relying on that old energy. And that's mainly to, pay the salaries and pay off the coal plants and everything else there. And so it's really accentuating what we have right now. So this has really revealed that we need to make some systemic changes in what's going on, but we need immediate relief right now, as Dana was pointing out and Rabbi Margulis has pointed out, to take care of people now who are at risk.
Great. So we have two last prepared questions, and then we'll go to questions in the on Facebook. So please enter any questions you have. So we've heard this could be devastating. So what, Rabbi Margulis, what can people do?
Well, there's several things. So the first, most obvious thing is write to the Public Services Commission and let them know that you want the moratorium to be extended really through next spring, because there's no end in sight that we can see for this pandemic. So the moratorium really needs to be extended through next spring. So that's the first thing, is to write to the Public Services Commission, but it's really a bigger picture than that. So the two arguments that the people in the Public Services Commission gave for why they might have voted against extending the moratorium was, first, that the utility companies can't afford to go unpaid, and second, that if the moratorium was extended, the fear was that we were going to be hurting the people that we want to help, because at the end, when the moratorium is finally lifted, they will have huge balloon payment of back fees. And the answer to that is the United States Senate. And I hate to say it, because the United States Senate has not been our friend lately, but that's where the pressure really needs to be put. The Senate has got to come back from recess, and they have got to pass not the act that is before the Senate, but the act that that Congress passed, the HEROES Act. The utility companies, yes, they do need to have to be paid, but you can't force that off of the backs of the people who are poor and are the least able to pay. That's where the federal government needs to step in. And our states and our governors have been pleading with the federal government to give more resources to the states to be able to help, so that their utility companies can continue to work, and also so our hospitals can keep working, so that our schools aren't laying off our teachers, so that the SNAP or food stamp benefit is increased, so people aren't going hungry. I can go on. And Dana mentioned something about debt relief. There has to be not just a moratorium on paying your utility fees, but they have to be forgiven, because there's just no way that low-income and undocumented workers are going to be able to pay those bills that are going to accrue over the course of a year. The only place where that funding can come is from the federal government. So pressure on the Public Service Commission, short term, but long term, big picture, we've really got to press the Senate to come back to work, to stop playing politics, to stop playing with people's lives, and to pass a comprehensive bill, and to include the undocumented community in the bill this time. They pay taxes, they work hard, they are part of our community, they are human beings as worthy of human dignity and security as anybody else in our community, and they need to have access to the same resources that everybody else does. So I really beg everybody, please call Ron Johnson, please call Tammy Baldwin, and tell them that you want them to get back to work and to pass, again, not the bill that's before the Senate, but the bill that the House already passed, and to include the undocumented families that are in our communities in this bill.
Right. And our last question before we go to the Facebook comments, so please add yours there. Dana, if the PSC does decide not to extend the moratorium, what resources are there for people who may get their electricity?
The most known resources for people to receive when they are struggling to pay their utilities is energy assistance. And one of the organizations that is very well known and has been very helpful in the community is Community Advocates. Their phone number is 414-449-4777. Again, that's 414-449-4777. That is one way to get some financial help for paying your utilities. Another way is contacting 211, and they would be able to give other organizations, like private organizations, that give help with with utility payments financially. And the other resort is, of course, talking to We Energies and letting them know, what your financial situation is. But one thing I will caution people that call We Energies, do not make an agreement that you cannot keep. They cannot make you agree to their arrangement. So do not make an agreement to a payment arrangement that you cannot keep, because that is what becomes legal and binding. And during this time, we need a record of how helpful We Energies is to the customers while they are at a place that they cannot pay their bill due to no fault of their own. So We Energies should make every effort to be helpful and get an arrangement and an agreement that you'll be able to pay. But do not, again, I'm going to stress that, do not agree if you cannot meet that agreement. But that's the only help. Unfortunately, the PSC has truly stopped receiving and accepting comments from the public. They had a website out, and it was available until August 10th at midnight. And this was the only way that that the public could leave a comment regarding their handling of the utilities moratorium while we are in a pandemic. Otherwise, it's basically left that the public doesn't care, so why should they? But the problem with that is they hid the information of the website, and major organizations like Northside Rising, Sierra Club, and other organizations did not get that information until this past Friday. So we all scrambled to try to get comments to the PSC to let them know. But we're going to keep the pressure on. We're not going to stop. Yes, you can continue to call, but unfortunately, they're not taking those comments seriously. So we have to bring to light the fact that they're not working for us, and they were elected to serve the public, and they're commissioned to serve the public. So we're asking them to do what's right, oh man, and that is to show mercy, love justice, and to walk humbly with your God.
Yeah, and if I can just add a couple of resources that are here in Dane County, and unfortunately, many of these resources are from private organizations. I say unfortunately because, again, this is something that our government really should be stepping up to do. But some amazing organizations and individuals in Dane County have stepped up to do what they can. And also statewide, Voces de la Frontera, which is based in Milwaukee, but they have a COVID relief fund, particularly aimed at the Latinx and the undocumented community, and that's statewide. Here in Dane County, there is a fund called Psalm 46, and it is jointly run by the African American Council of Churches and a church called the Lighthouse, and that is aimed primarily at the African American and Latinx communities. The Latinx Consortium for Action has a fund. It's being operated through Centro Hispano. And the Boys and Girls Club of Dane County also has started a fund. So there are some resources out there. I will be totally honest and tell you that most of these funds, they raised a lot of money up, in the beginning in March and April, and the demand was overwhelming and they quickly ran out of money. As far as I know, they're all still accepting donations, and if you are at all able to donate to support any of these funds, I really urge you to do so. Psalm 46, Voces de la Frontera, the Latino Consortium for Action, the Boys and Girls Club of Dane County.
I can add to that too a little bit, because what Dana said about We Energies, and she's in the Milwaukee area, is true for other utilities too. you can certainly, first of all, hopefully the moratorium is going to get extended. And by the way, even though the comment period is up, there's nothing to stop you from contacting the commissioners as well as the governor and lieutenant governor and letting them know that this is important, that they need to do this. They need to, this is for humanitarian reasons. Um, but you can contact the other utilities, if you're with them, if you need to do that. There is a low income heating and energy assistance program in the state. And then there was supposed to be money too from the CARES Act previously that was, I think, targeted towards relief for people. I'm not sure who to contact for that. All I know is the utility board was talking about there was some funding available. So there might be other sources, but the first thing is we're going to try to get this extended clear through until next April.
I think the governor's office is the place to call to find out what's going on with whatever monies are still left over from the CARES Act. I know a lot of it's already been distributed, but I would call the governor's office and find out what's left, how has it been distributed, and how do we get it to the people who need it the most.
Yeah, and there is a Keep Wisconsin Warm Cool Fund that raises money for this purpose. So, yeah, the governor's office would probably know about that.
Great. We just had 2 questions come in and one that's already been answered. But I'll ask it anyway in case anybody wants to add on more. And the question was, how long should the moratorium be extended? This last time it was extended for 1 month. And I think you've mentioned through April, but I'll throw it out in case anybody wants to elaborate or offer anything else.
Well, I mean, some of that's crystal ball gazing, right? Nobody knows how long this situation is going to last. And, even once there is a vaccine and the virus itself is under control, the impact on our economy is huge, and there's going to be a long-lasting repercussions. We already know so much of the restaurant industry is just not coming back. The hotel industry, anything that's connected with tourism, the arts, those industries are they have been so hard hit. Retail, I mean, we know, some of the large retail outlets that have been around. Sears has been around for like 150 years, and they're gone. JCPenney, like the big retailers, they're not coming back. The malls aren't coming back. So it's really hard to say how much longer this needs to continue, because the economic crisis is really long term.
Well, one critical factor here too, that we have a winter moratorium already that extends each year from November 1st until April 15th. So it's already been, the moratorium has been extended this year, clear up until September 1st. To extend it only another month and then have it fall off and then have it start up again in November makes no sense. I mean, one thing is that in addition to all the other problems people are having economically and health-wise and everything, just the emotional stress that we're putting people through about feeling like they can be secure is a huge issue. So there's a certain inhumanity in not even saying, yes, because there's a moratorium that starts in November, we're going to go at least until April. We know the COVID crisis is not going to be over by the beginning of October at the way we're going now. So we're asking for at least that, but that gives us time to reevaluate, as well as to consider the programs about how do we provide humanitarian relief for people who need it, so that even come next April, they're still going to be safe and taken care of.
Great. And this sort of, please go ahead, Dana.
No, I was just going to say I agree with both Don and Rabbi Margalis, because the pandemic really doesn't have an end date. We're just saying, at least like Don just said, give people peace of mind. That's all we're asking. Give them a peace of mind so that issue, it's not something that they have to wrestle with, whether they're going to get food for the family, get their pay their insurance, or pay their light bill. So it's just being humane. It's truly just about being humane and about caring about your neighbor. Simply, if you're not in the crisis, think that maybe your neighbor is. So let's help each other out in this crisis.
There are a couple other actually factors along with that. One is that, we have a lot of school kids who need to go to school virtually. If they don't have power at home, they're going to get deprived of that access to education. And then if people otherwise couldn't stay in their home because they didn't have heat or water or whatever, to put them out in either the public or to have to live with family or friends accentuates the risk we're already at from COVID. So we're creating that much way of further problems for people who are already very troubled right now.
Great. And then the last question that was asked, which I think was touched on a little bit, but what are the options, or are there any, for debt forgiveness on utility bills that the state should be exploring?
At Northside Rising, we are working to speak with We Energies about forgiving debt of over $500. We think that's a fair assessment of people being able to do in this time. But if it continues, just as it's been stated, this needs to come from Congress, and they need to clear and clean up these issues that we have with people who, due to no fault of their own, are in a situation, and it could have happened to any one of us. So we want We Energies to come to the table and really show good faith. And we think that they can, and we think that they should. They have cost us a lot. We've paid a lot. So it's their time, it's their turn to give back. And I believe that if they did that, that would be a great act of faith and grace.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That was all of the questions we had online. So I just want to open it up if anybody has a closing thought that they'd like to add.
I can add at least a couple more things. One thing is we talk about this a lot as an urban issue, and it's not just an urban issue. It affects rural areas with our food systems, and especially a lot of the small organic and CSA farms that we rely on too. So the people there who, because their systems have been disrupted, they need the income too. They need their power on so they can deal with their food and get it into the urban areas as well. But there are also other longer term solutions. We talked about at the federal level what the Senate needs to do. There are things the state can do here. But as you're working in local communities, there are things you can do too, which will help alleviate these sorts of problems in the future. If you live in a community where they're trying to support low-income housing, you need to make sure there's not only plenty of affordable low-income housing, but that it's energy efficient, where people can live in good environments where it doesn't stress them out otherwise and put a strain on their budgets, to where they don't get in these situations. If they have efficient housing that maybe has solar and so on too, that will help lower their energy bills and take away from this risk that they have right now. And there can also be a lot of good jobs in these communities that go along with that. So these things actually that can help the local economy while you're benefiting those who are most at risk now, to help prevent some of this in the future, where you can take local action.
Yeah, and I just want to say that this pandemic and the economic fallout has really shone a spotlight on the really deep systemic inequities in all of our systems, in our healthcare, in our education, in our food supply. just across the board. And I hope that people will, really pay attention. So many of our organizations have been talking about these things for years and feel like we've been out there, crying out in the wilderness. I'm hoping that now people really can no longer turn their backs and pretend like they don't see what's happening in our country, and how so many of the things that we so take for granted, like cheap food and cheap clothing and transportation, so much of that is because we do it on the backs of poor people. And we really can't continue to operate in such a shameful way anymore. We really have got to reevaluate the systemic injustices and make long-lasting change. So many things that we've talked about today are stopgap measures, and we really have to look more systemically. I really appreciate Pastor Kelly lifting up for us the quote from Micah, that it is incumbent upon all of us to do justly and love mercy and walk humbly with our God, whoever's God that is, however you define that. But that's, do justice. What does it mean to do justice? In the Jewish tradition, we talk about God having two attributes, the attribute of justice and the attribute of mercy. And the world cannot operate with only one or the other. We have to have both. So I really call upon all of us to look at the injustices in our system and to look at them with compassion and with mercy and make the changes that we need to make so that we're not having this conversation again a year from now.
I just want to thank Don and Rabbi Margalis for what they just shared and how you brought it full circle, because I honestly felt like people aren't listening because they feel like this is an urban issue. And here they go again. But the fact that you really brought the broadness of this issue and how it affects us all, it really hits home and should touch hearts. And it may not be you, but it could be your neighbor.
Mm.
And we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. So put yourself in your neighbor's shoes. And if it is your neighbor, would you want it to be you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. This was really great. I just want to thank you all again for joining us today, but more importantly for all of the work that you're doing on this. And we, hope, please do contact the Public Service Commission about this, and then contact the state and Congress about the other issues that we talked about, other ways that they can help offset these impacts. Thank you all so much.
And thank you to the Sierra Club.
Thank you.
Thank you again for the opportunity.